You are watching a DuBois Arts and Entertainment feature, filmed and produced in downtown DuBois. DuBois TV is proud to support our arts and entertainment scene, and we wish to thank our partners for making this production possible. Enjoy the show!
This video is produced and underwritten for DuBois TV by The Kinetic of downtown DuBois. Of course.
Offering a high-tech creative space for public and private events of all types, business meetings and presentations, and educational workshops and classes, The Kinetic is revolutionizing how business and education is being conducted in DuBois. The Kinetic offers private technology, artistic, creative, academic, professional tutoring, and mentoring services to the public and business community, as well as full high-tech support for all of our special events and television productions through advanced social media and web marketing, live web television streaming, and advanced multimedia production services. Put the power of digital media technology to work for the betterment of your family and your community. The Kinetic. Minds in Motion, 32 South Brady Street, directly across from the DuBois Public Library. Learn more and watch our live TV webcasts at thekinetic.org.
Yo, it's the Paulie Soul Show.
Yeah!
Yo, it's the Paulie Soul Show.
Yo!
It's the Paulie Soul Show.
Hey, ho, 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 ho. It's the Paulie Soul Show. Zip it out, do that now.
Only at the Kinetic. Yo, I am Paulie Soul, and I am stoked to be here today with John Russo and Russ Streiner.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
These are the gentlemen that have created the zombie genre, and I'm fan shy right now. I'm overwhelmed to meet you guys.
Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to
meet you.
Yeah,
pleasure to meet you. John,
nice to meet you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so much.
having us here.
Thanks for inviting us, and thanks to this wonderful setup here at the Kinetic. I am truly impressed. You guys have got it all together.
Before we get started, I want to ask you guys one question. Can either one of you guys smell my brain?
I can.
You can't.
I cannot.
You can, but you cannot.
Yeah,
I can.
He's tuned in much more.
And I might jump up and attack it any moment.
I have a delicious brain.
Because I'm angry anyway. Because he has a famous line in the movie, and everybody asks him to say it.
We're going to say it. We're going to say it. We're going to say it. We're going to say it.
We are going to say it?
Oh, I hope
When?
so. Several times.
Not
So
now.
he's going to say it. You're going to say
Let's
it.
all say it.
Nobody
You let
ever
me know
asks
when you
me.
want to do the line.
Well.
But there's going to be a challenge to it.
Uh-oh.
Because once I do it, then you're going to have to do your very best impersonation of Russ Streiner playing the character of Johnny in Night of the Living Dead. You're going to have to give it back to me. And there's a big prize in it if you do
Well,
it.
Russ, I just want to give you fair
no
warning.
pressure, no pressure.
I've watched the movie twice in 24 hours.
Okay, then you're stoked. as you said.
And that's
am.
why I can smell your brain.
I am stoked. This is the first movie that I remember in my lifetime going to see repeatedly at the movies. It is what I call the very first cult classic movie.
Thank you.
Correct?
Thank you.
Thanks for saying so. Well, a whole bunch of people around the world share that view with you, so we were lucky to be a part of it.
Okay. The line that we're talking about,
Yes.
they're coming for you, Barbara.
Close but no cigar.
Okay.
The real line. Now pay attention.
You watched it twice.
Because there's going to be a pop quiz.
Okay.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. Okay. Now, no pressure.
No problem.
Let's hear it.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Oh, man.
You gotta
Could you do it with maybe just a little bit more?
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Well, this is interesting because this is one of the questions.
We don't want to turn this into an acting class.
Yeah, this is one of the questions I have. How many takes did it take to get this classic scene right?
To be honest with you,
Not too many.
I don't remember. It was not do it over. It wasn't one of those. But I would guess it was probably within 2 or 3 takes.
We didn't have a lot of film stock. You know, the movie was shot on a ratio of 6 to 1. You know, 56,000 feet of 35 millimeter black and white film. That's what was shot. And Woody Allen or Scorsese or a lot of directors, Hollywood directors now, will shoot 25 times or 30 times as much footage as ends up in the finished movie. We were shooting 6-1. George Romero was just winging it a lot of times, one take and that's it. And in those days, you had to hold your breath till the footage came back from the lab because it could be scratched. There could be any number of things wrong with the footage. So, but to George's great credit, he knew what he was doing, and the rest of us knew what we were doing, and we got the film in the can.
When we talk to young filmmakers today and talk about the difference between traditional film, where an actual strip of celluloid ran through a camera, and digital production these days, their eyes just roll back in their head. They can't, the technology compared to what goes on today, the technology was so low tech, it was unbelievable. Now it's gone just the other direction. It's very high tech. But actual film moving through a camera, when John mentions a 6-to-1 ratio, what that means is you were shooting approximately 6 feet of film for every 1 foot of film that ended up being used. And that's how that ratio was worked out. Now, 35 millimeter film traveled. You were filming at 90 feet a minute, so you were grinding through 90 feet of film a minute. So to get back to the question about how many takes, it was true throughout the film. We didn't have a whole lot of let's back up and do it again. We did have some retakes and so forth, but we were pretty much 1, 2, 3 takes and off to the races.
One of the things we did, though, is we did a lot of rehearsal. We rehearsed every scene, got all the timing down. And if you look at Night of the Living Dead again, and this is a lot of it's kind of a lesson for filmmakers, what I'm going to say now. We did a lot of timing and follow focus, where two people might be talking in a scene, then a third person comes in. Maybe the focus has to change to be on that third person. Maybe he's standing behind the original two. Then maybe the camera pans over to catch a fourth actor coming in. You don't see that too much in low budget production or any production now. It's usually do a master shot, do a medium, do mediums on everybody, and then cut, and that's how a scene is put together. But by doing it the other way, usually George was shooting and I'd be doing follow focus and Russ would be doing something else. You know, we were the actors and the crew a lot of times. So
writers, producers, actors, the whole deal.
We wore a bunch of hats because we had to.
Yeah, and we were able by that time to do it well because we had done hundreds of TV commercials and every other kind of thing, and we were a very tight-knit production unit by the time that we made Night of the Living Dead. We weren't just chicks cracking out of an egg and all of a sudden let's make a movie. But by doing all those timing shots and other things that we did on a very professional level, it did elevate the film, whether people consciously realized that's what they were seeing or not, but it definitely has an effect.
The film obviously has, excuse me, many layers of meaning in it because it's a classic for 1968, so it's still the classic horror movie of our lifetime.
All right.
You guys have literally defined the zombie genre.
Well, I have to just say yes and thank you. I mean, so many people have said that by now, and it's earned its status. So I can't quarrel with it, and it's. Well,
from my memory, I'm thinking back. I was alive in 1968. I was in my teens, and Roger Corman, Ed Wood, they had zombies, but they were more like voodoo zombies.
Right. Yeah.
They came at you like this, and they never really scared me because what were they going to do?
You sound like you're quoting me.
You guys invented the whole flesh eaters, shoot them in the head, the whole definition of what happens with zombies. You guys did that.
Well, that started off with every film is a story, and every film is a storyteller's version of what they want to tell. And John and George Romero worked out the details of how that story would come together. They were the two writers of the screenplay. And for any filmmaker, for any project, it all starts with what is the center story? What is the core, what is the theme of this movie? And John is very qualified to speak to that, because it was he and George Romero banging out the story that brings up details like the one you just mentioned.
Yeah, I kind of say, Paul, that, zombies weren't heavyweight fright material until we made them flesh eaters.
That's exactly
right.
right.
So on. And I mean, as a kid, I went to see every movie that came into town, and not just horror movies, but every movie in the movies. We had 3 theaters in our small town.
We grew up in that
pictures
age where you went to the
changed
Saturday matinee.
twice a week and all that thing. So, but zombies, I was always disappointed. They shambled around just like you.
Yeah.
Throw somebody against a wall, maybe try to strangle somebody, and that not very scary.
Not very scary.
But what did do the trick is when we made them flesh eaters. But that's not enough. You have to have a skillfully put together story with all the suspense and twists and turns and so on that a good involving story needs.
This story, of course, was radical for its time. Mm-hmm. You had a leading character was a black man. Mm-hmm. And I've been told to ask you, was this the first blaxploitation movie?
Well, it wasn't blaxploitation. As boring as it may sound, and as unimaginative as it may sound, Duane Jones, the fellow who played the character of Ben,
yes,
was simply the best actor who auditioned for the role.
That's funny.
The role that John and George originally wrote was for a friend of ours, and the character was written as a truck driver. Even when it came down to, once we saw Duane Jones, which we met through a mutual friend, and he grew up near Pittsburgh, where we're from, but he had already moved off to New York City, a mutual friend of ours introduced us to Duane Jones, and the weekend that he auditioned, it was a hands down, Duane is the person who should play Ben, and even our friend who was supposed to play the character agreed. And
yeah.
So John can tell you about how that character came about.
Well,
the
character kind of changed. I don't remember if the whole script was written at that point, but George and I had been collaborating and throwing ideas around, and then George got tied up with a commercial job, and I didn't want the project to die, so I just took over the writing, and that's what we did. If Russ was producing a job and for some reason he had to bow out or was distracted by some other job, somebody had to step in, and that's what we did. This is the wearing many hats kind of thing. So I just came in, and after the script discussions, I rewrote George's story that he started with, put it in screenplay form, and then wrote the second half of the script. So I was very instrumental as it ended up. And like, I wrote the thing in there that you mentioned before we started shooting this show about Ben punching. He didn't slap her, he punched her.
He
knocked her out, she folds into his
arms. Which in
arms.
1968 was absolutely shocking.
Well, I did have in mind, when you say blaxploitation or whatever, I knew for sure that when the and I'm thinking this while I'm writing it, when this gets down south, if it gets down south, if we can actually sell this movie, it's going to create a furor, because thoughts are going to be going through people's heads like, oh, he punched a white girl. Oh, he laid her down on that couch. Oh, he's unbuttoning her. He's unfastening her trench coat. What the hell's he going to do, rape her?
Exactly.
And I knew, and we were out to be iconoclastic and to push the envelope, because...
So you were aware that you were making a socio-political statement at the time?
Even to that extent, yes. In many places, like the eating of the we had one scene where the big scene after the truck blows up, and then we joked and called it
The Last Supper.
The Last Supper.
A little on the irreverent
they like
side.
their meat a little more rare than I like mine. I like mine a little bit more cooked.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
But the whole concept
There's nobody here that wants to be cooked, though.
of blaxploitation, and whoever the friend of yours was who asked that question, we have never, ever, and don't now today, including George Romero, ever consider Night of the Living Dead to be black exploitation. It was never intended to be that. At the nugget of the center of the answer that your friend is looking for is Dwayne Jones was simply the best actor who auditioned to play the character of Ben.
And even when he gets killed at the end of the film, we were having some kind of script discussion or whatever we were doing, and I said, you know, Pennsylvania is a big deer hunting state, and every year 300,000 or 400,000 deer are slaughtered and 10 or 12 hunters. So wouldn't it be ironic with all these posse members loose with guns that somebody would get killed by accident, and wouldn't it be ironic if it were our hero Ben? And so that's what we did.
I still remember sitting in the movie theater the first time, how stunned I was at the end of the movie.
And that's what we intended.
When he was killed, I was just like...
That was absolutely
stunned.
Absolutely intentional.
Yeah.
I had seen Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original.
Okay.
And that, I didn't know what I was going to see. I was on a break from college and saw the posters outside the theater, went in, and the 8 o'clock show people were coming out with totally stunned looks on their faces. And I thought, and said many times during if we can make a movie that causes the 8 o'clock people to come out with those same stunned looks on their face. And the other thing, Russ, is we talked about paying off. One of our main motives was really paying off the people that paid money to see a good horror film and seldom ever saw one, right?
Absolutely, because with all due respect to what other filmmakers were doing, and you mentioned the zombies. By the way, nothing to be trifled with. If you happen to be in Haiti to this very day,
I was going to bring
you want to stay off of the beaches at night because they take their zombies and voodoo and their dark arts take it very, very seriously.
Yes, they do.
So you don't you don't want to tamper with that, because there are people on this planet that take that very seriously. However, your point was right. You know, zombies just slowly staggering around to try to get you, not very scary, just as, in all due respects again to other filmmakers, when you see a movie title, The Attack of the Crab Monsters, except there are 2x4s hanging out of the crab monsters, that has a tendency to not be very scary. You know, it's when you can see the mechanics of how the crab monsters work.
Our 2x4s were nailed over the doors and windows.
Yeah,
they were.
But now you saw the movie twice. Did you notice
in 24
any
hours
writing on those 2x4s?
The very sharp-eyed fans.
I did, but
I
didn't. I couldn't tell you what it was, but
It was upper left, lower right, middle.
Okay.
Because sometimes, you know,
it was late at night
if we
last
were
night.
shooting scenes where the windows or doors weren't boarded up yet, we had to take them down. And if we were shooting scenes,
you wanted to put them
then
back
we
in the
had
same
take
place.
after take after
we
take.
had to label those things
we had
so
to
we put
label
them back
the-
in the right place.
That's amazing.
And
That's
wouldn't have a
amazing.
continuity error.
But we don't want to give away too many of those little secrets. You know, let the image of Night of the Living Dead being a classic film in your mind, let it rest without, well, did you happen to see there was an extension cord running through? We don't want to get into that.
But that
At any
doesn't
rate.
that doesn't bother me because of the Ed Wood School.
Yeah, right.
Planet 9 from
exactly.
Outer Space is still as
Planet
crazy
9.
as it is,
Yeah.
as awful as it is. I love that movie.
Right.
So if you see the string, it doesn't bother me.
Well, with Night of the
in the
Living
mechanics
Dead,
of it.
one of the things that we wanted to do, right, with the construction, the choreography, and the shot composition of the very opening film scene in the film, this tiny little car working its way, it gets bigger and
The
bigger and
winding
bigger,
roads of
larger and larger.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah. But you know from the musical score and this lonely kind of desolate little car tracing its way, you know this is probably not going to be a comedy. And Night of the Living Dead never lets you down, because once the car gets to its destination, the cemetery, you are immediately sucked into not just the bickering and the squabbling going on between Johnny and Barbara, but very quickly you are brought into, okay, here is the center of our story, you know, with this strange character. We don't know who he is, staggering through a cemetery.
Was that Chili Billy?
That was not that was not Bill Cardille. That
Bill
was
Heinzman.
That was his character. His real name was Bill Heinzman.
Okay.
And he was the very first zombie in Night of the Living Dead. He's the guy who attacks Johnny and Barbara, and Johnny comes to her rescue in the cemetery.
Johnny just hits his head, and bang.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
he must have had a glass jaw or something.
Well, he did. Well, we talked, that's one of the story points. We said, yeah, Johnny does have a glass jaw. And of course, I always thought that it was John Russo and George Romero's way of getting me as the character of Johnny out of the script early on. I think I'd do 7 minutes or something, and then...
Russ, I have to ask you, in that movie you have 2 pens in your pocket.
Yeah, how... boy, are you a keen-eyed observer.
And I said to myself, he was writing as they were going.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Two parts of that story. First of all, I found Barbara to be so annoying. I was making a list of grievances that could be filed against her because she was so annoying. The other
I found her kind of annoying.
The other end of it was that I was helping to write the script. You could never tell when you would need a pen. Say, hey guys, how about if we do this? And John and Jack would say thumbs up or thumbs down. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Russ was a trained actor. He was a graduate of the Pittsburgh Playhouse School of Theater, and you know, a lot of noted people came from there, like Gene Kelly and Charles Grodin and Shirley Jones. And
awesome.
Many. So, I mean, he was one of the few trained actors in the whole movie, but because of that training and because of our whole history doing every kind of production, we were very keen to props and costumes and little touches and all that.
Yeah.
So the little touch of the pens in the pocket helps say this goes very well with annoying, steadfast,
kind of driver gloves,
anal retentive Johnny, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly. And it's important, I think, to note too that the driving gloves, you just mentioned the driving gloves. The reason for the driving gloves was we knew that Johnny was going to come back. Sorry if I've blown it for anyone who hasn't seen it.
If you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, Sam is going to have to put up a spoiler alert before this. That Johnny would come back in a kind of dramatic way.
Yeah. And
the irony of Barbara throughout the entire movie, we have to get to Johnny, we have to get to Johnny, Johnny's out there, we have to get to Johnny. The irony of how Johnny comes back is something that was it was designed into the story. So, the reason that I make such a fuss about the black driving gloves up at the beginning of the film is to clearly establish that wardrobe item, okay? I get it, Johnny black gloves, Johnny black gloves. Okay. So after most of the film is now over, we haven't seen or even thought about Johnny for so long other than Barbara mentioning him. The very first thing, when the door swings open and the very first thing you see is that black gloved hand coming up on the door frame.
Yep. It's classic.
Was there any doubt in your mind that was Johnny?
No, it was classic.
And so those are the kinds of things that John references when he say that those things were all planned out. They didn't just happen by accident.
And that one was kind of planned after the fact because we really did intend that Johnny was killed when his head hit that tombstone.
Okay.
But that part of the scene was the first thing shot on the first day of shooting. We didn't come back to the cemetery till the last day of shooting, or one of the last days. So during that time, the first draft of the script, well, the only draft that ever existed of the script, I had Johnny didn't come back, and by the way, Barbara survived.
Oh.
You know, which I could tell you about later. But the point is that somebody, and I don't think it was me, it was somebody said, well, what if Johnny comes back and drags Barbara out instead of her surviving? He drags her out of the house during the big zombie attack. And we thought about it, and we quite, well, are people going to believe that Johnny was still alive? Could he be a zombie? Maybe his brain was only partially damaged by that hit against the tombstone, because we didn't want people to say, how can he come back? He was killed.
Well, they don't stay dead.
Yeah, so, well, yeah,
And
but
his
if the brain wasn't
destroyed,
damaged
enough.
if the brain's destroyed, they don't come back. So was
But
his
you guys
brain,
invented that. The whole you have to shoot him in the head thing.
Yeah.
right? But
right.
we didn't. But we could have blown it if people
What's his
thought
name?
his brain was destroyed enough by that hit on the tombstone that he
Robert
that
Kirkman.
he couldn't come back.
He owes you a lot of money.
Who?
Robert Kirkman. Is that his name?
Robert-
Yeah, Robert Kirkman.
Robert Kirkman.
Walking Dead.
Oh,
He owes you a lot of
A
money.
lot of people owe us a lot of money. But I want to finish that point because it's important.
I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
That okay, so that gave Russ a chance to come up with his driving glove thing after the fact, kind of, because then we could go back, shoot the beginning of the scene, and he could establish the driving gloves, so that when you see that
glove come in
as
the
soon as
door
it
like
hit,
that.
yeah, then you know it's
Yeah.
Johnny.
The very first scene in the film, it's important to understand two things that probably for your viewers should be established. The first thing is the very first scene that you see, the cemetery scene, was not all finished in one day. It went to 2 days of production. Coincidentally, it was the very first day of production and the very last day of production. So there were literally, in real-time terms, probably about 3 months that separated one part of the cemetery scene from the other part of the cemetery scene. So we had some time to make mid-course corrections, and a story that a lot of people got a kick out of. The car that I was driving with Barbara in it was my mother's real car. And she was driving back and forth to work. We used the car the first day to pull into the cemetery, fine. Everything is hunky-dory with the car, except in the interim 3 months, someone crashed into her car.
Interesting.
And we said to, my brother and I said, don't get your car fixed, because when Barbara releases the handbrake in the cemetery, we're going to have to stop this car from drifting somehow. We will we'll make it look as though it wrecked into a tree, and voila, the damage is already there. And that's precisely what happened.
That's fantastic.
But that's another example of taking what could be a negative to, oh, now the car's crashed and this and that, blah, 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 cry in our beer. We turned it to our advantage. And that was, I have to say, that Night of the Living Dead, from the very beginning to the very end of the editing, was very resourceful in that kind of way. The other point that I wanted to make about the production details is we didn't just show up one day with cameras and decide we were going to make Night of the Living Dead. George and I started an actual commercial production company very much like this one back in the early 60s. And we were keeping groceries on the table by making TV commercials, documentaries, business films, you name it, we were doing it. And indeed it helped us to learn our craft.
Interesting.
So, and rather than taking money out of the business, we kept buying more equipment, better this, better that. So by the time Night of the Living Dead came along, that was filmed in 1967, we literally had, the latent image had everything that it needed. It had all the cameras, lights, equipment, editing equipment, you name it, we had it, supplied by our commercial production business.
Crazy question. What were they actually eating?
What
What were they
eating?
actually
At
eating?
the
Real
cook-
animal
at the
parts.
cookout.
Real animal parts.
Yeah, we had a stockholder who owned a packing house, and he brought, sheep's intestines and hearts and lungs and all that kind of stuff. And to our great surprise, our ad agency clients, who we always considered very staid and stuffy kind of people for the most part, but they came right out and chomped into those hearts and lungs and stuff. One of the funniest thing that I think, one of the funniest things during the making of the movie to me was when I walked out of the farmhouse one day, and Vince Cervinsky, who was our production manager, he's got these white stringy things, and he's got a tub full of water and Coke bottle, and he's pouring water down into these white stringy things. I says, what? It looked like a bizarre scene from like a Fellini movie or something. I said, what in the hell are you doing? He says, well, George says that these are sheep's intestines, and they don't look real enough, and I got to put some water in them to give them some life, so I got to tie knots in them, and then I got to pour this water in and tie more knots. So, and that's what they were.
That's fantastic.
Real intestines.
I have someone told me that when you were delivering your film to New York City, that you drove from Pittsburgh
That was
to New
Russ
York
and
City.
George. I didn't go.
You didn't go. You went, and you were on your way to New York City.
Yep.
That was the day that Martin Luther King died. Is that correct?
It was indeed, and it was a shocking, and it still is to me. What was going on in the 60s at that time was just hard to imagine. The very first print that we had of the movie, finished in every way. Now this is 35 millimeters, so some people may be familiar with seeing the old big cans.
Actually, the expression we got in can comes from that.
Very heavy. With our 35 millimeter finished print in it, and we had arranged distributor screenings for New York City because most of the distribution deals for independent films, at least, were being made in New York. So we lined up interviews, loaded the print into our car, and we're driving up. The interviews started on a Monday. We're driving up on a Sunday, turn on the radio, or we had the radio on, and a news bulletin comes on that Martin Luther King had just been assassinated. Tragic. But it makes me wonder, especially since the character of Ben was coincidentally played by a black man. And it was coincidence.
The social unrest that was unleashed that day was prophesied in your movie.
I wouldn't say prophesied. I mean, it's
and at the end, when they're putting meat
coincidence.
hooks in him, it was it amplified my sense of the social unrest that had just exploded that day.
Well, and that's something that none of us can alter. We like to think that we might, in some magical way, alter the fabric of space and time. Night of the Living Dead was a coincidence in a bunch of ways, some good, some bad. The assassination of Martin Luther King brought the entire focus of all the tensions of Vietnam and everything else, brought it to that one critical point, the racial tensions that were going on in this country. Now, when we heard that news bulletin, our first reaction is, this is not good. It's not good for the country in general.
Right.
It is especially not good for us. Here, we've got a black man in the lead. He gets killed off by a seemingly redneck posse at the end of the film. This is not good. And we wondered whether any film distributors, they might say, sorry, we are not going to touch this, not for all the tea in China. Sorry, guys, you've
bad timing.
Make something else, make a comedy, and come back and see us. And so those were the kinds of things that were running through our mind. I have to say that we did not get that reaction. We did not get the reaction, and there was a lot of violence at that time in cities around the country.
Oh, I remember it well.
We did not get a negative reaction to having a black man in the lead. What did happen, however, was once the film was released October 1st of 1968, about 1 year after.
Hold that thought. Coming through.
Okay.
Hey, seriously? That's my birthday.
You're kidding.
I swear to God. October 1, 1968.
So,
I swear to God, man.
No kidding.
That's another thing that was a coincidence, and we weren't aware
I was
of.
standing there waiting for a moment to come out through here, but
We weren't.
Did you get that? Did you
aware
get
that we
that?
were
Did
making-
No, please have that.
Okay.
All right. I swear to God, man. October 1, 1968. That's when I was born.
Wow.
That
Wow.
is weird. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, continue.
Synchronicity.
So the release date of the film was October 1st, 1968, about 1 year after the production went on. It took about a year for the editing. And getting the distribution deal together. We did not have any criticism from the distributors, but when that movie showed up in theaters, and in some cases black theaters, after the premiere night, the very next night, I went by myself, not with John, George, anybody else. I went to a black theater in the Homestead area of Pittsburgh. I was the only white guy in the place. I was never really fearful, but I must tell you, talk about audience engagement. I have not to this day ever seen an audience as engaged in that film. That black audience literally were standing on their seats shouting instructions. They really hated Harry Cooper. If I had been if I had been Harry Cooper, that would have not been a good place for me to be. I don't think that anybody recognized me as Johnny.
If you would have wore those gloves, they would have recognized.
If I would have worn the gloves, they would have. But and when Ben gets killed, that audience was absolutely stunned.
Good shot. Okay, he's dead. Let's go get him. That's another one for the fire.
And you didn't have to be a black audience to have that.
I had that same
moment.
reaction, that stunned reaction. Yes.
And this audience went from shouting instructions to the screen on on their seats to absolute quiet,
Stunned silence.
Stunned silence.
Yes.
And that I saw that with my own eyes.
By the way, everybody talks about a redneck posse, but they weren't especially redneck. They were like any posse would have been.
Right.
That's all we were, you know, if you had to get people out into the woods and the countryside or any place shooting down zombies, they don't do anything redneck. They do what had to be done. They accidentally shoot Ben. They don't shoot him on purpose.
But it comes off that way. It comes off that way,
I
John.
mean, the redneck posse would have looked the same.
Exactly.
And acted the same, but, you know, they don't.
They were simply, that posse and that sheriff were just simply out to kill off the enemy. That's what their assignment
We didn't
was.
say anything about their racial attitudes.
Maybe it was the history of the time that created that image of the posse. Because of the, you know, the meat hooks and the black man and shooting him
But they
and
put those
the
meat
riots
hooks
that
in
were going
anybody.
on. So
They would've
maybe
put 'em in
the
anybody.
general consciousness went, a bunch of rednecks killed the black, you know.
There's no way that the film purposely didn't direct you to think that way. You know, some people did interpret it as, you know, a redneck posse member's redneck sheriff. The film itself never led you down that path.
It never talks about anybody's politics, ever. It never even talks about
No, it
anybody's
doesn't.
racial attitudes.
No, it doesn't,
Carl
but-
Hardman is not, who played Harry Cooper,
Who played
is
Harry
not
Cooper.
portrayed as a racist. He's portrayed as a guy that wants to hide in the basement. And
Yeah.
Dwayne plays a guy that wants
I just
to...
didn't like him.
Yeah, well,
I just didn't like him.
Well, who would? He's
And-
a
and-
hard-headed.
Then the character did its job.
And,
Yeah, he's
and
a
Carl
hard-headed,
Hardman was also one of the producers.
You know,
Yes,
not a
yeah.
very in-depth thinker. And Dwayne, in real life, was very intellectual. He was teaching at Columbia when we cast him, and very scholarly. And you know, he and I became good friends during the making of the movie. And any time he came back to Pittsburgh, he'd give me a call. We'd go and party and all that stuff. In fact, I wrecked my car at his house because I didn't listen to him. Because at his mother's house.
At his mother's house. Partying at his mother's house.
It had a low brick wall in a curving street. And he said, my wife and I were in my car, and he said, everybody tries to back out of here, and everybody hits their car on that wall, so don't try it. We had been drinking, but I wasn't totally plastered. And I said, this
Well, it was
doesn't look hard to
1968. The
me.
laws
I
were
can
different
back
back
out
then.
of here and, you know, and crash.
Crash.
And Dwayne's still on the porch, and he goes, oh, Jack, you would try to be intrepid. And I never forgot.
And the other side of that, the Harry Cooper character, Carl Hardman was as far away from that kind of character that you could ever imagine. Carl was a very creative, very progressive, you know, thinking guy, you know, who had theater training, who had commercial business training, and generally an all-around good guy. And Marilyn Eastman, well, Carl, you absolutely, he was not anything like Harry Cooper.
When he first started doing his lines, he asked George Romero, he said, George, am I doing it too big? Am I too over the top? If I had been directing, I'd have said, yeah, cut it back a little, but George said, no, go with it. Which, you know,
it works today because you
obviously
watch
it
that and you
works,
just
yeah.
dislike that character.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what you want from a character.
Exactly right.
But
Everybody wants to know how much money of your own did you spend to make this movie? This was a shoestring budget, right?
By the time we got done with it, with Latent Image running up its lab bills and every other thing, about $60,000, and then by the time we paid off bills and everything, and we paid some bonuses to people that we thought deserved it. It came to $114,000. But that doesn't count the equipment and everything else that we already own. So
originally, we each there were 10 of us who put up $600 a piece. And that's what we got started, but it's important to remember Latent Image had all the equipment and so forth. So basically what the $6,000 investment went into was buying film stock and having it processed.
Getting it started. Then we thought George went in the dumps totally. When Russ came out of his office and he said, we can't make this movie on $6,000. We're going to need $12,000. And George just, we're not going to make a movie. He's in the dumps. And I said, well, I thought for a while, and I said, well, then how about the original 10 people? We're all going to act in the film. We're going to work on the film, and the next, and we each get 6 shares for our $600. Next group of people gets 2 shares for the $600 because all they're going to do is put up money. Turned out not to be totally true because they ended up being extras, and the one that owned the packing house, Ross Harris, he had furnished the sheep's.
And am I wrong to guess that it
stuff.
made estimations of $14 million nationally and $18 million globally?
The movie has made so much money we'll never be able to count it, and the reason we can't count it because we got cheated out most of it.
It's
please tell us about that, because every artist needs to know about that.
Do we have to?
Well, I will say this much about it. It was unfortunate. We probably, between George Romero, John Russo, and me, we probably have one of the most expensive film educations that anyone has ever logged anywhere. But there was just terrific amounts of money that were stolen from us by the distributor, by underreporting, underpayments, and that kind of thing. We made money. We made money, and our investors made money, primarily because the film made so much money they couldn't hide it all. So we did make money. The movie didn't make anywhere near what it should have based on its popularity.
For us, it made all the money. For other people and for thieves. And then they went bankrupt whenever it looked like, when we finally won the battle to have the case tried in Pittsburgh instead of New York, they filed Chapter 11 and all we could do was get the rights back.
So they went out of business, essentially.
After they squandered everything.
Is it almost like an albatross to make such an iconoclastic movie as your first movie? Because then you've both done tremendous, you have lifelong careers.
I don't consider it an albatross for the simple reason
everything you do is measured
launched
against
our
that?
careers, and then we've been able to go on and we're still making movies.
And John, you've written 20 books?
22 or something
22
like
books?
That.
That's fantastic.
I don't count them. It's funny, I don't count them anymore. When I started, I used to think, boy, if I could just walk into one store and see one title by John Russo, I would be so overwhelmed and thrilled and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's what Amazon's for.
yeah. Nowadays, yeah.
Nowadays, that's what Amazon.
Yeah.
Where do you find a bookstore?
They're all going out of
They're
business.
all gone.
In fact, my regular publisher, Kensington Books, they said, it's really tough. I used to get big, fat advances, and now the advances go down because there aren't any stores. And then Borders went. Borders
Right.
used to be a main market for my books, and they're out of business. So the whole model now is using Amazon and so on, which I happen to be here with my publisher, Gary Vincent, and he's sitting here, and
He's in our audience here today.
He wanted
Gary's
to be
here
today, and
Well,
Gary
glad
does
to have
a
him with us.
terrific
Thank you,
job.
Gary.
Yeah, and he's one of the pioneers, and he's right in the forefront of this whole movement toward Amazon and that ebooks and so on.
Just to jump back for 1 minute on the business aspect of things, for some people who were involved with Night of the Living Dead as an actor, an extra, an investor, whatever, that's ancient history. Night of the Living Dead is not ancient history for John Russo, me, and George Romero. John and I are the two trustees of Image 10, the company that owns Night of the Living Dead. In our responsibilities and our fiduciary relationship to Image 10, we deal with Night of the Living Dead business literally every week,
if not every day.
So even though the film was released in 1968,
That's amazing.
it is just last week. There's a movie shooting it starts shooting next week in Pittsburgh. Came to us for the rights to use Night of the Living Dead as a T-shirt and Night of the Living Dead as a poster, and perhaps Night of the Living Dead film clips in their movie. So literally every week there is Night of the Living Dead business, including something that may one of these days happen here in DuBois, and that is Night of the Living Dead live as a stage play. It premiered last year in Toronto. It had 2 runs in Toronto, and a very, very active and terrific theater company here at the Wrights Theater.
The Wrights Theater, yes, I know them.
Maybe one of these days, Night of the Living Dead live will be here in DuBois, and you have one of the managers of the Wrights Theater in the audience today also. So,
yes, we do.
Well, one of the things that happened with this run in Toronto, we got tremendous publicity, and Russ and George and I did Q&As there and so on, but there is an awards thing that goes on called the Toronto Broadway Awards, and Night of the Living Dead Live competed against things like Les Mis, for example. Well, we won Best Actor in a Play, Best Actress in a Play, Best Ensemble Cast, Best Director, and Best Play.
Yeah.
And then we landed an international agent who is now making the kinds of deals where community theaters can now license and put the play on, and for royalties, we get royalties. It's just starting, but we get royalties. But not just community theaters in small places, but huge.
But it's fully authorized by the people who made the original, and it's also family theater. It is not. It's the first act kind of tracks building the story. The second act is pretty much of a comic send-up. It's very, very entertaining, and it is something that you can bring your kids to and not be too worried about
my kids are
what are they going to run
okay.
into.
Yeah, it's not a fuzzy carbon copy of the movie. And by the way, any other play that's been out there, and there have been some, they're all unauthorized. And
My
the
kids
only
are
one
all
that's
Night of the
authorized
Living
is
Dead
Night of the Living
aficionados.
Dead Live.
Good.
All my children
It's
are.
called George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead Live. And
Who's this guy you keep
Week
mentioning?
3,
George Romero. Who is that guy?
I don't know.
He was a guy. He stumbled
He's
in.
not
off
here,
the,
so-
he stumbled in off the street one day. Now George was then a good friend and is still a good friend, and a very talented filmmaker, as you
As I know.
as you know, and very, very involved with Night of the Living Dead Live, plus a couple of other things that we've got up our sleeves.
I want to ask you about a couple of things you might have up your sleeve.
Okay.
You look around society today, we're at a very boiling point, pretty much like 1968 was.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the zombie apocalypse. You guys birthed that.
Right.
The whole zombie mentality, the zombie survival kits that people make.
Oh yeah, everything.
You guys,
None of it would exist if we didn't come up with this idea
exactly
of making the dead people
exactly.
flesh
You have
eaters. That was
affected the
that was
American
whole
lexicon of people's the way they think about the society. Is there a new movie in the making that maybe you guys get together and kind of?
We always talk
The
about
social
ideas.
structure
I have
right now
2 or
is
3 zombies.
at a
In
very
fact,
boiling point.
I have an agent in Hollywood and in West Virginia, and they're right now trying to raise money for one that I wrote called Spawn of the Dead. And it's everything I write, I try to make it unique.
Yes.
And not copies of other things. I have a script for a zombie comedy called Talk Kappa Zombie. All hell breaks loose in the frat house of the living dead. And it's pretty funny, and so I always have about, probably right now about 16 different screenplays. They're not all zombie. I have 2 or 3 that have the zombie thing, but I'm interested in so many things, not just horror.
Well, speaking of your screenplays, you had the screenplay for Return of the Living Dead.
Well, Russ Streiner, Rudy Ritchie, who's the guy that was going to play Ben, and a longtime friend of ours, and I, the 3 of us developed a Return of the Living Dead script that was straight horror. And at one point, Frank Sinatra was going to put up $3 million for us to make that movie, and I was supposed to direct it, and Russ would have produced it. And we went to Caesar's Palace and met with Sinatra's people, and were to meet with him the next day. And
you better make a good movie. You better make a good movie.
His mother's plane went down in the mountains.
Ooh.
And she was killed, and that deal never went through. So then, Tom Fox, who eventually produced Return of the Living Dead, took it to Orion and Hemdale, and they said, straight horror is dead, you can't make straight horror, let's turn it into a comedy. So Dan O'Bannon then rewrote the script, and then I novelized his script. So there are 2
Did you like what they did to it?
2 different.
They made a comedy out of it. Did you like it?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. Dan was a great guy. We still have credits, and we still get royalty checks from Return of the Living Dead.
That always makes it better.
Something unusual, an actual statement and a royalty check.
Yeah.
And Shaun of the Dead was a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
The English translation. Yeah.
What do you think about the zombie rage? The way they do zombies now, is that it's against?
You mean when
it's against
fast zombies, slow zombies?
Fast zombies. They call it the zombie rage. Do you like that?
I'm not a fan of fast zombies.
I don't care myself. I mean, we were asked that question in Toronto, and
I thought
well, no, everybody, everywhere we go, people ask that question. But to me, make it work. If you have a logic for it, if it works, if it entertains people, I'm not a purist in that sense.
You're not a purist.
So I'm wondering this. You have somewhat of an audience here. Maybe before we wrap things up, maybe some of your audience members might have a
question or two from the audience
that has popped into your mind.
Come on, you guys are sitting here with the producers of the Night of the Living Dead, Russ Streiner and John Russo. You surely have a question amongst you, please.
Okay.
Dave Clark.
This is more for John. All of this talking about zombie apocalypse and all that. But I know you mentioned before the difference between ghouls and zombies and how that's mixed up a lot. Could you explain that?
So there's a question related to
there
ghouls.
There is a question
ghouls and
from
zombies.
Dave Clark here.
Yeah, what's the difference
between ghouls and zombies?
Well, we
Good
call them
question.
ghouls because they were ghouls. You know, to be a ghoul, you have to eat dead human flesh. You know, people that hang around cemeteries and actually do this. Not every zombie is a ghoul. I mean, it's only a ghoul that goes after human flesh. But now, because now they've almost become, in the general public's mind and filmmakers' minds, zombies have now equated to ghouls, even though that's literally not the definition if you follow me. But that's because we made them flesh eaters.
You made that happen.
It's so embedded into the culture now that people think of every zombie as a ghoul also. They're all flesh eaters.
What do you think about the vampire craze?
I like all of it, you know. Just make a good story.
You're just a normal guy that likes to scare people. I like that about you, right?
Yeah,
yeah. Whatever makes a good story, you know.
So I had fun playing with the zombie. You know, I don't really believe in the supernatural. I don't believe in the paranormal very much. I think it's all BS. But to have fun toying with it, you know, like I did my novel The Awakening, which is soon to be published, by the way, dealt with a guy who's hanged as a vampire in 1776, and all their magic, the stake in the heart and every other thing they do, works backwards. And 200 years later, he crawls out of his grave, and now he does have a blood craving. Well, but the idea of that is that he thought we were going in the wrong direction to secede from Great Britain and all that other stuff, and now when he comes back in modern Pittsburgh and sees the crime rate and all the other ills that we have, he's convinced he was right, and he wants to do something about it.
Sounds interesting. I have one thing about George Romero, that he said that the scariest film that he made was Mr. Rogers' tonsillectomy.
Well, Russ, you worked right?
That was part of, I talked earlier about the commercial work that we did, and for those who don't know,
you guys did a segment for Mr. Rogers.
Fred Rogers, the Mr. Rogers neighborhood and the neighborhood of make-believe all happened at WQED television station in Pittsburgh. And our production company and our backgrounds, you know, I'm a Pittsburgh native, so is John. And in addition to TV commercials, documentaries, and so forth, we did any kind of project you could put on film, and one of them was Mr. Rogers having a tonsillectomy.
Awesome.
And that's where George's quote about that was the scariest thing, because it was a medical procedure.
That was fantastic.
I think one of George's scariest films was Martin, which is a vampire film.
Okay.
You know, and but that vampire, just like my vampire in the Awakening, doesn't have fangs, doesn't sleep in a coffin. You know, he deals with the psychology of it. Is this kid twisted or not?
So you're breaking the tradition in this.
Yeah, I walked into one time. I had to go meet with George at Latent Image. He was still at Latent Image, and Russ and I had formed our own company, New American Films, at that point. And I went over there, and Mike Gornick, who was George's DP, director of photography, they were watching 20 minutes of Martin just edited, you know. So I sat there in the screening room. When the lights came on, I said, George, that is one hell of a scary movie. And they both laughed, thinking I was kidding. Like, how can I be scared by anything when I'm a filmmaker like they are? But it was. You know, it's a really good film. You can get it from Anchor Bay, but, you know, anyway, that's a recommendation.
Well, we have a lot of young artists in the house today. A lot of young musicians, filmmakers, photographers, people that are struggling artists. You guys surely have some words of wisdom for these guys. today, how do you made this classic film on a shoestring? You are now icons of the movie industry. You surely have wisdom to impart to struggling artists today.
Russ has all the wisdom.
Well, John,
we've
written 20 books.
Put it on.
He has the wisdom, but you have the opinion.
We do, and I think it's important too to understand that Sam Otero, who's connected with the Kinetic,
my producer, Sam Otero,
is also an educator. And an educator, and I mean, I'm not saying this because Sam is connected with you. Sam has headed up a program at Jeff Tech here, which is essentially a neighborhood high school. Yes. And it is one of the most robust programs to teach young people the basics and the beginnings and up to pretty sophisticated television production. And that is something that I don't think that Sam gets enough credit for, but that's a hometown thing. Anybody who is in high school in Jefferson County ought to be taking a look at that program. But the one thing that young artists cannot ever escape from, including those of us who have been around for a while, every project is a new project, every project is a fresh project. The merits of that project will be evaluated on that project itself. Yes, if you write an important novel, you make an important film, you get a little bit of slack. But that little bit of slack only lasts for a very, very short time. You better come with new material and fresh ideas. Otherwise, these young people are nipping at your heels all the time, looking to take your job. And that goes for TV interviewers too.
Well, I take that to heart there.
We have a really good, we're still negotiating contracts and deals and still making movies, still going into production with things. And Russ and I just finished a Civil War documentary working with the Historical Society in Brookville.
That's fantastic.
And we're turned on by everything we do. And making the Civil War documentary and traveling, to doing battle reenactments in several locations and working with the Historical Society people here and the Historical Society people down in Falmouth, Virginia, because the two towns are tied together in this documentary. So
we're running out of time.
Fresh.
I'm so pleased to have met you guys. We are running out of time, and I want to thank both Russ Streiner and John Russo for being here today. This has been
thanks for the opportunity.
An exciting opportunity for me.
DuBois is kind of and this whole region is kind of our adopted second hometown. So
well.
Yeah.
I am Paulie Soul, and I've been talking here today with John Russo and Russ Streiner of The Night of the Living Dead. What a great day for me. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Could you do one thing for me before we are done?
Sure.
Could you look at your camera and say, yo, it's the Paulie Soul Show.
Yo, it's the Paulie Soul Show.
Yo, it's the Paulie Soul Show.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Yes,
thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.